So I think it's important to see that in Marx and Engels' mind that something new is happening, something very new, um, something they see a coming revolution, and that revolution will be the victory, will mean the victory of the proletariat, the establishment of the proletariat as a dominant class. But I think it's important to see that they think that there's something different about that. We have a very cynical idea that all revolutions end in just a kind of a musical chairs thing where they're just new oppressors and new oppressed rather than something different. It's just sort of pathetic sort of view of history. And they don't have that. They really think that the next revolution will be the last revolution because the next revolution will abolish the conditions under which people are oppressed to begin with. There'll be no need of further revolution because there'll be no more class struggle because there will be no more classes. And that means there will be no more exploitation. That's the classic view of the communist, right? This is at the bottom of page 10. They say all the preceding classes that got the upper hand sought to fortify their already acquired status by subjecting society at large to their conditions of appropriation. That is, in the old revolutions, the new class, like the bourgeoisie, bourgeois class, when they conquered, they just used that new status to exploit those below them. But this will not be possible in the next stage of society, they think. The proletarians cannot become masters of the productive forces of society except by abolishing their own previous mode of appropriation, which is wage labor, and thereby also every other previous mode of appropriation. They have nothing of their own to secure and to fortify. Their mission is to destroy all previous securities for and insurances of individual properties. All previous historical movements of minorities, or all previous historical movements, were movements of minorities or in the interests of minorities. The proletarian movement is the self conscious, independent movement of the immense majority in the interests of the immense majority. The proletariat, the lowest stratum of our present society, cannot stir, cannot raise itself up without the whole superincumbent strata of official society being sprung into the air. Um, so the idea is that the victory of the proletariat is the victory of the immense majority of the common person. And it will be the end of exploitation, right? Because it'll mean common ownership of the means of production, which means that no one will work for wages. You'll just work to produce what we need for society. And that this is inevitable, he says. This is the very end here. He said, I'm starting right here, the last paragraph. And here it becomes evident that the bourgeoisie is unfit any longer to be the ruling class in society because people are starving and miserable. It is unfit to rule because it is incompetent to assure an existence to its slave within his slavery. This is where Fitzhugh sounds like Marx and Marx sounds like Fitzhugh because they're both saying that the industrial worker is a kind of a slave. Because it cannot help letting him sink into such a state that it has to feed him instead of being fed by him. Society can no longer live under this bourgeoisie. In other words, its existence is no longer compatible with society. So, right. So at the end, what the bourgeoisie therefore produces above all is its own gravediggers, the proletariat. Its fall and victory, its fall and the victory of the proletariat are equally inevitable. So I just want to emphasize that because to understand the Communist Manifesto, a lot of things are necessary, but one of the things you need to keep in mind is that it's a political pamphlet. Marx and Engels are revolutionaries, and they're philosophers, social commentators, economists, whatever. But fundamentally, they're political revolutionaries, and they really do think that the revolution, the communist revolution, is inevitable. That is, it's just the next stage in history. Now, of course, the story is more complicated, but it's an incredible document, the Communist Manifesto. It gives you a lot of insight into modern societies and whether or not its revolutionary politics is sound. I mean, I don't know about that, but that's up for you to decide.